Now, European military experts have presented a plan that could offer Ukraine protection from Russian missile and drone attacks. Called Sky Shield, it involves deploying a European force of 120 fighter jets to protect Kyiv and western Ukraine from Russian airstrikes. The initiative proposes covering 3 of Ukraine's operating nuclear power plants and the cities of Odesa and Lviv, but not the front line or Ukraine's east. Its authors stress that Sky Shield would be an explicitly Europe-led air protection zone operated separately from NATO. Well, let's examine this with Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, who's a defence analyst and former army officer. Welcome to DW. This proposal raises the prospect of European countries getting into a hot war with Russia, doesn't it?
Well, it does if Russia chooses to be the aggressor, as it has done in Ukraine. But this proposal comes on top of the European Sky Shield initiative, which Chancellor Scholz, I think, launched about 2 years ago, which looks like an integrated air defence system for the whole of Europe and has been signed up to by 23 countries. So it is reactive at the moment, but it does threaten a hot war, particularly if the USA, as we suspect it might, turns its back in Europe because it's become fascinated by the Chinese problems that it sees coming along the road. And Europe has to look to itself.
OK. So just explain to us how it would work, then. Is this about 120 jets constantly patrolling the skies over Ukraine?
No, it wouldn't. I mean, the old adage is you can have all your jets in the air for a third of the time, or a third of your jets up in the air all of the time. And it would be actually less than that in terms of the deployment of the aircraft. But I think the jets, we shouldn't get sort of mesmerized by the idea of fighter jets. We need to look at the whole air defense system. And I think the European Sky Shield initiative, which I mentioned previously, is an idea whose time might have come. And I think that Europe has to put some effort into that now, particularly after the Brussels Security Conference today. OK, so how many... let's talk about this proposal, which seems to be on the table at the moment. How much support does this present Sky Shield proposal have amongst European leaders? Well, I think that it's a fairly recent suggestion. And so I'm not entirely sure how many European leaders have signed up to it, even in principle. But it could work. The problem is not putting the jets in the air. The problem is to do with command and control arrangements and also rules of engagement. Those are the 2 things that have to be sorted out first of all. But it's perfectly doable.
And what happens then when a European jet gets hit and downed by a Russian missile?
Well, that's a political decision, of course, but depending on the rule of engagement, which that particular force has been given, then I suspect it would retaliate. But the great problem is that can lead to escalation, and there has to be some mechanism to prevent escalation, because mistakes sadly do happen, and we don't want to go into World War III because some trigger-happy pilot on either side has let loose a missile by mistake.
Hampered as European governments are by democracy and the need to get elected, how do capitals far away from the fighting sell the prospect of sons and daughters of voters and voters themselves being killed by Russia in a war that's not theirs?
Well, it's a hard sell, but I would say it's not their war at the moment. Ukraine is, to all intents and purposes, and politicians deny this, but Ukraine is fighting a proxy war on behalf of NATO at the moment, and certainly on behalf of the other European states. And if Ukraine falls, which I don't think it will, then there's no saying what will happen next. And I come back to the US threatening to withdraw from NATO. I've asked the question before. If Putin did attack Brussels, would the Trump administration be prepared to sacrifice Washington, D.C. to come to Brussels' aid? And I think there's a big question mark over that at the moment.
So how soon could a mission like Sky Shield take to the skies, and who would be involved?
Well, I mean, it could happen very quickly indeed, and it would be. I hesitate to use the phrase "coalition of the willing," but that's what it would be. And I would imagine that the UK and France and Germany and the Baltic states and many others would be in a position to offer up elements of their air forces to provide 120 jets. That seems to be the basis of this initiative, and that shouldn't be too difficult to arrange. But as I come back to, command and control is the important one, and rules of engagement are absolutely critical.
OK, thank you for talking us through that. Defence analyst Stuart Crawford.
Thank you.